come once again to discuss things.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentleman Holiday Month. I am Sipartu. Joining me today is...
Aggie for fun.
And Steve.
Steve was all like texting the Geeky Gentleman group chat, and he's like, hey, I've made it through my first ever holiday month. And so this episode's going up on the 20th. We still got at least one more episode for the 27th, and maybe try to get something together to do for Christmas Day, so we'll see about that. But so you still got at least one more, Steve. We'll see if you manage.
I've made it for every episode so far. I've got this.
Okay, Steve's got this. The narrator, Steve, did not got this. Anyway.
Yeah, that's about right.
Yeah. Anyway,
Yep, that's me.
We're here today to do a review of a film Steve picked. Steve, what film did you pick?
I picked the 1947 Frank Capra classic, It's a Wonderful Life.
This is the first time I've ever seen this film.
Yeah, remember you mentioned that you hadn't seen it before. Alfie, have you seen it before?
This is my first as well. We're both It's a Wonderful Virgins.
Wow, that's really, really interesting. Because I assume both of you grew up on a shit ton of things doing the ending to this movie, where it's like, what if I was never born?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. I think it's impossible to avoid because it's one of those things that's, especially given the fact that so much of this film's like success has to do with it when it went public domain, this is very good testament on just like how things entering the public domain really shape culture and pop culture in general, and why we should probably do that more, because I think it's only to this film's benefit that it actually has been imitated so often, but we can go into that.
I didn't even know it was in the public domain, which is kind of annoying because I paid $3 to watch it on YouTube, and I just don't think that's right.
Why didn't you just like message me or something? You could get my Amazon Prime and just watch it on there.
Steve, I already got your Netflix. I'm gonna feel bad. I'm gonna feel like I'm just fucking impersonating you.
Dude, my friend, she has my Netflix, my Amazon, my Hulu, my HBO, and she gave my Netflix to her family to use, who live in a different state.
I might have to hit you up on that HBO, though. I might have to hit you up on that HBO. Wonder Woman's coming out, and I really don't want to pay for it.
Just text me. I'll give you the password. I don't have Disney Plus though. Someone needs to give me Disney Plus.
I'll give you
Actually,
Disney Plus.
though, Steve, say your password right now online.
Yeah, Steve, share with everybody, comrade.
Steve Baxi exposed.
Shit! Everyone's gonna access to my porn.
Man, I just can't imagine what kind of porn Steve watches, because like it's got to be intellectual as fuck, you know.
My favorite kind of porn is when someone like walks into a conference hall and gives a lecture. It's great.
That's sexy. That's fucking hot. And like they got like they got like fucking one button on their blouse or dress shirt. You know, I'm not gonna judge. Just undone, so you can just see a little bit of the neck, and maybe it's like a little hot in the conference room. There's like just a bead of sweat going down, and the fucking like.
Anyway, talking about making violent love, this film about Christmas, watching this for the first time was, I don't know, I don't get much chance to watch legitimately old films from 1946 even, so like it's always a bit of the thing that struck me the most about this specifically is this is paced really well for a film of that period. Like, when you go even to stuff from like the 70s, you'll be like, oh, okay, this is before like many modern films. It's probably just I'm used to that. It's not a bad thing. It's taken me a little bit to get into it. And there are certainly lulls in this, I feel, but overall, This is like bam, 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 bam. Like I was like taken aback, but I was like, whoa, what the fuck? It's like a modern film with a grain filter over it. This is nuts.
Yeah, a lot of that has to do with just how well structured and clear it is from the beginning. You know from the start that your perspective is Clarence, who's gonna go watch George Bailey's life and then meet him up at the end. And so the only events you see from of George's life are the ones that matter, the ones that would matter to Clarence accomplishing his mission. So there's just no fluff. The whole thing is just structured around explicitly only the information you need to know.
And that's probably like a really good sign of, would you say, because again there's not much I really know about the behind the scenes of this thing, do you say that's more a strength of the script or the direction or both?
As far as I know, I feel like a lot of this sort of comes through in the actual filming as opposed to the script. I know that there is like an old book that this is supposedly based off of. I've never read it. I don't even know what it's called. I don't think it's one of those things that pops up very often. But a lot of this, I think, just comes from Frank Capra just being a really, really good director, especially in this era. Because a lot of like the best and most interesting things about this movie and the character work and the themes are just stuff you wouldn't put in the script to begin with. And a lot of it is also just kinds of things that I don't think it's necessarily that it's the dialogue that's selling it as much as it's just the actors and the interactions and the way things are just kind of cut together. The dialogue's good. Like I love the sort of like classic 1940s everyone's a smartass dialogue. I think that's fantastic. Mm-hmm. And there are just legitimately some really great comedic beats. But a lot of the things that really work for this movie are just like how George Bailey is framed in certain scenes, or the kinds of props that he's interacting with, or the kind of perspective you're jammed into versus other things that are going on. I think a lot of it just comes through from like Frank Capra's actual directing, because all of his movies are like this. All of his movies just have like this lightning clip of a pace, even if they end up being a lot longer, which is just not common of this era. Like even movies that are half this movie's length, because this is a long movie for 1946, mm-hmm. Are moving at a much quicker pace.
Yeah, no, I definitely noticed that. It definitely didn't feel like it was dragging. It felt very, like, I think that's the interesting thing is a lot of classic movies, like really, really famous movies, tend to have more modern-esque pacing, and I think it's because those films have kind of set a tone, you know? Like the more like classic and groundbreaking and you know, trend-setting a movie is, the more it'll kind of in subtle ways reflect modern filmmaking. I've always just picked up on that, because like Kubrick's films are really slow, but like in a much more methodical way that like you see a lot of tracking shots and modern films will take very clear inspiration from the way Kubrick would shoot things. I don't know, it's just an interesting side note. I think if we are going to get a little critical, though, I think one of the things about this film that was really, really dated, I mean, maybe not super dated because we are still doing this, but still, was Jimmy Stewart playing such a young man in his early 20s and then mid-20s and then 30s, so young. And yet he's fucking like 39 throughout the whole film.
he's a 70-year-old man. That's just, the black and white does not help. He's a handsome 70-year-old man, but he's a 70-year-old man. But like that is one of the things which I feel that's a decision you have to make, and I think the reason why we do that still to this day is because that's not an easy decision to make. Because if you are following a character through their life, and we're taking it from such a long breadth of a period, the options you can go about that is, normally, unless you really want to go art house, and just have the 70-year-old man also be the 8-year-old. But you normally have the kid version, and then the adult version / young adult version. That will just stick you all the way through. Sometimes you can have multiple stages where you have like multiple actors, like teens and young adult, and then finally for the final. But at the same time, I think the decision you lose there is you don't form a connection with them, because that one person you're following has been 4 different people or 3 different people, and there's not much of a connection there you form with the actor specifically. But then at the same time, you also get the awkwardness of not being quite sure how much time has passed by looking at people. So yeah, that's a tricky one to untangle. I'm not sure if there is like an answer to that one.
Yeah, I feel like it is one of those things where, like, you're right, you do need a level of continuity, and you can't exactly get Jimmy Stewart to play his 10-year-old self, so you're going to have to throw a kid actor in somewhere along the line. But after that, you kind of just have to stick with the face you have, or else things will feel kind of disjointed. And honestly, like, Tom Welling was 25 years old when he played 14-year-old Clark Kent, which is the actual age of Clark at the end of season 10. Mm-hmm. If we can get away with that shit now, it doesn't really necessarily bother me that like Jimmy Stewart's playing someone who's so much younger than he is, and through these different time periods, because we still do that shit.
I don't know. It's funny because he's 39. Like, I had to do the math on it. He is 39 when we're introduced to him, and like, kind of the point is like, oh, he's just back from college, and now he's going to go see the world. Or no, he's not even back from college. He's just graduated high school like last year, and now he's going to go see the world. And it's like, dude, he's Jimmy Stewart's like a pretty youthful looking dude, but like there's an awkwardness of like going to the high school dance and dancing with the girl that just graduated, you know? It's like, ugh.
He's also 38 at the end of the movie, and he looks way older.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because they got to put makeup on him so he looks older by the end of it, you know?
Yeah, because he's got gray hair. I'm like, dude, who's got the gray hair before 40?
Reed Richards.
Yeah. Ooh, Jimmy Stewart is Reed Richards retro casting.
Ooh, I would love that.
Yeah.
But I was going to say, because you mentioned Dated, I didn't think you were going to go there. I thought as far as Dated goes, I think the one thing about this movie that you kind of have to like actually stop and explain to people is what the hell a savings and loan is compared to a bank.
Oh yeah, I didn't even think of that.
That's really weird. Like I remember we got to a point, because I was watching it last night with my friend, and like we got to a point with like it was the run on the bank, and they were waiting until 6 o'clock and making sure they still had money, and my friend was just like not understanding what the conflict was, and it's because we don't fucking have savings and loans anymore.
Yeah, that's a good point. Steve, explain a savings and loan to the people.
Yeah, right now.
Okay, so basically there are savings and loans, there are credit unions, and then there are commercial banks. Before the Great Depression, a lot of things like savings and loans would basically be backed by commercial banks. You didn't have the FDIC, which sort of guaranteed deposits on your bank returns. So like you'll go into a bank today and you'll see guaranteed FDIC. So like up to $100,000 in your account is backed by the federal government. That didn't exist before the Great Depression. And so old things like savings and loans would like get their money from banks, and they would be sort of like micro lenders for specific communities and cities. And so like you'd go to a savings and loan and you'd get a mortgage, or you'd get a car loan or something like that. And it's mostly because you wouldn't be able to get approved at an actual bank. And the people whose money finances the savings and loan is redistributed out to the people in the community that need the loan. So it's kind of like, it's almost like a barter system where like Frank gives you $100 to pay on his mortgage that you lend to Bill, who's about to put a down payment on his car.
So it's more of a community bank kind of thing.
Basically, but it's all kind of guaranteed by a commercial bank that it's in partnership with, which is basically what the evil dude in this bank is. The evil
Mr.
dude,
Potter.
Mr. Potter is trying to strong arm. And so if the savings and loan does not literally have any money, then the barter system breaks and it can't be in business anymore. And that's kind of the whole conflict, is that if there is a run on the banks and the savings and loan runs out of money and has to borrow from the commercial bank, then it's no longer a savings and loan and just gets absorbed into the commercial bank. But we don't do that anymore because now we have FDIC, we have credit unions. Like, banking laws got so strict and so different after the Great Depression, because of because of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, that the kind of infrastructure to have a savings and loan just doesn't exist anymore. I think there are still, like, theoretically some, but they don't really matter. And so, like, you'll watch this movie and just wonder, like, do they own a bank or what? And the answer is a lot more complicated.
They own a fucking neighborhood loan shark. Fucking, that's the scene you're not seeing, is George Bailey's going and breaking someone's legs in between.
I'll wrap a lasso around it and throw the moon on ya.
20s worked is that they would do it through savings and loans. It was basically a loan shark operation.
That's interesting. Like, I kind of gleaned that from context, but yeah, I'd never really, like, looked into this enough before, so that was fascinating. Thanks for the explanation. Yeah, no, I mean, I think all of that does just work from context. You can tell that there's some kind of financial operation, even if you don't really understand what it is. You understand that it's a financial operation that's not a bank. I found that fine. I mean, if we're talking, like, really dated things, like the fucking Mammy,
That's pretty bad.
yeah, like, I mean, there's that kind of shit's always there in those fucking 40s films. She's not terrible. She's just, it's there. And you kind of, like, roll your eyes at it. Though, I don't know. I a lot of the dated elements, like, I can call George Bailey playing or not George Bailey. I can call Jimmy Stewart playing a teenager kind of dated, but yeah, you brought up the example of Tom Welling. I can call him, like, dating a clearly much younger woman, kind of, you know, this is a little much, but then fucking, what was someone pointed out the example that there was an actress and an actor in a film where the actress played the character's daughter, and she was like his teenage daughter of like 14, and then a couple years later those two actors are in a film again, and they're love interests now. And it's just the double standard of the age of women and their leading man correspondence is just hilarious. So, I mean, it's dated, but it's not like it's noticeably dated, but it's not like we've done anything better since. So just, it stands out, I guess, is the point I'd make. But then there are other things that are, like, you know, very impressively modern. You were mentioning that a lot of it's just the way it's shot, and, like, you know, there's a whole lot going on in that flash to if he hadn't been born kind of thing. But, like, it's amazing how much of that is just caught visually. Like, they don't really linger on it. It's just strip club after strip club is the new downtown, and you got, like, the sign for Pottersville, and, you know, fucking the cop shoots at it and one of the lights goes out kind of thing. Like, there's just a lot visually going on screen that's really interesting.
One of my favorite things about older movies like this is because they're so minimalistic, and the techniques of filmmaking just weren't, like, a thing quite yet, that there wasn't, like, a cinematic language you could depend on. You had to get, like, really, really creative, and you sort of, like, accidentally stumbled onto visual cues that weren't necessarily a language but still kind of felt emotionally right. So there's a moment where his brother comes back after their dads died, and it's been 4 years, and he comes back with a wife, and his wife is like, oh, she's going to get a job with my dad. And George's whole thing is, well, now that his brother's back, he can take over the family business and he can finally go out and leave. But the second his brother shows up, he realizes that's not going to be an option. And there's, like, this really, really interesting shot where George is, like, standing on the center of frame, and the train's going backwards and his brother is going forwards towards the camera, and you have no one in the frame but George, and he just keeps looking back at the train leaving him, and the camera moves to the right as they go towards him and his brother, but George is constantly looking to the left at the train that's just about to leave. And it's like this really sort of perfect distillation of that longing feeling that George has. In a movie today, you would be able to kind of, like, tighten that out and turn it into like a legitimate shot. But just as it functions in the movie in the 40s, it captures that emotion of just like these two worlds pulling so well, even though it's not the most elegant thing in the world. And I just really like that.
Alfie, you're coming through very quiet. It's really hard to hear you. Like you're clear, but you're like whispering almost.
That's what happens.
Alfie's been sent to a world in which he doesn't exist, and he's seen how much better everything is. Like, I think that's my favorite gag that people do with this movie. It's like, I hate to bring up a Family Guy joke and seem uncultured, but like, there's an episode of Family Guy where they see like a world where Peter never married Lois, and you think it's going to be like some awful thing, but it's like, yeah, President Al Gore tracked down Osama bin Laden and beat him to death with his bare hands. It's just like, Peter, you can't marry Lois. This is too good.
Okay, can I be coming in now?
Yeah,
there you are.
You're good.
Yeah, I just turned the gain up on the old mic. But yeah, that was weird. I actually just got sent to an alternative dimension where fucking Dragon Ball DC never existed, and world peace was achieved. 2020 was much better.
The internet was a safe place for posting about Dragon Ball.
I think it's worth it, honestly. So I came back. But yeah, what I like about that shot specifically you were talking about, Steve, is it's not accidental because it's clearly intentional. But like you can tell the technology and kind of like the visual
craft,
language that we have.
The craft.
Yeah, exactly. The craft that we have now wasn't quite there to be used. Like the same tools we use now weren't there. So how that shot looks is different. But like, I don't know if it's maybe just the contrast, but I kind of like that as well, specifically with the tone this film's going for, where it just makes it feel more real. It makes you feel like when you're in that situation, nothing's perfectly shot. But like there's little moments in your life when you do have those like contemplating moments where like you'll notice little inconsistent things that then take meaning to you, that symbols are formed from that. And I think the idea that the train doesn't have a meaning, but George ascribes it a meaning, and then we get to see that through him in the audience. And if you're not an attentive audience member, that could fly over your head. But like, I really like that approach because, again, for a film about a man who's going to, at the end, contemplate suicide, having life be given meanings, and like you have to inject it yourself to get meaning out of it, rather than the universal camera shots actually doing the job for you, I think is really powerful. So if that's intentional or not, doesn't really matter. What's on the screen works perfectly for this film.
And that's just my thing about it, is like it's not like it's this finely well-tuned cinematic language from an auteur from the very get-go, like it's like an Alfred Hitchcock movie. Like Hitchcock was very methodical about getting these meanings and these shots and stuff in frame, and Frank Capra's a very talented filmmaker, but he didn't have the same sort of toolbox and language that Hitchcock did, for sure. But despite that, every shot just has the mood. It conveys exactly the thing I'm supposed to be feeling, even if technically on some sort of like more streamlined level you could convey it better or make it more direct or make it more overt. All that's possible, but that doesn't negate how everything just feels right. So like another good example of this is after the graduation for his little brother, and him and Mary are just like strolling down the street, and it's like their first like little date. That's one of those scenes that feels like it's a little bit too long. Sometimes the dialogue feels like it goes over a bit too much. Like
George Bale was canceled. He tried to sexually he acted sexually inappropriately toward Mary.
Right. There's definitely stuff in that scene that like now you would cut. Not even necessarily inappropriate things, but just like pacing things you would cut. But there is nothing about that scene that isn't just like the perfect whimsical romantic vibe. It just comes off as really cute, and it just comes off as like really it's like both of these characters are kind of lyrically after each other. Even like they're singing off key to each other just comes off as very sweet and very sincere. And again, you could do that better, and we have done that better in romantic movies since. but the atmosphere is just so pure and it works so well it almost doesn't matter.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's funny, there's like, you know, you mentioned at the beginning of this, like, oh, well, you guys have all probably seen the end of this movie parodied or done their version of 100 times. And it's like, oh yeah, for sure. I was more surprised by like how much of this movie I'd seen or heard of because of other things. Like the Lasso of the Moon, I didn't know that was from this movie.
Every time a bell rings, an angel gets its wings.
Yeah, like that one was really popular too. The line I'm sad didn't become more of a meme was he's making violent love to me. Mother.
Yes, that's our meme now. We've all tweeted that, and it's fantastic.
Oh my god, that's like the funniest shit. There's so many lines in this movie where like everyone is just an asshole, and I love their dialogue.
Just that's the one I would have fucking used that for years, man. He's making violent love to me. What happened?
My favorite fucking one is I forget her name, but like the kind of like the bitchier one. Like if it was like a modern film, she'd be like the cheerleader, and she's got like all her suitors around. And she goes over to what? Yeah, she goes over to walk next to George. One of the fucking guys is just like, "We'll wait for you." It's like such like that is the original simp. that is like the beta simp. That is the original. That was the first one that existed in cinema history, and all descend from him. What a brave soul.
There's an urban legend about this movie because in the same scene with them, you meet the cab driver and the police officer, and one's name is Bert and the other name is Ernie. And there is actually an old like urban legend that this is where Sesame Street got Bert and Ernie from.
I mean, I had to assume that. Like as soon as I saw that, I was like, "Oh no way, really? Like it's even a reference to that? That's crazy." I wouldn't be surprised if that came out. Like that's kind of cool.
It's actually been debunked. I don't know like what the actual story is, but like someone did like verbatim ask the Sesame Street person like, "Is this where you got it?" And the answer was no.
Okay.
Which is a shame, but it's really funny that there are two guys named Bert and Ernie in this movie.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like now that just makes me want to see a version of Sesame Street's take on It's a Wonderful Life, but from Bert and Ernie's perspective.
The thing I really wanted to make sure we hammered in at some point was because I said you mentioned it and I said it earlier where it's everyone's seen the end of this movie. This is a lot like Home Alone, where it's a 2-hour and 15-minute movie, and the thing it's famous for is like the last 15 minutes.
Yeah, I mean it's like, to be fair, it's the part that it is all leading up to. Right.
Right.
George
not saying that was
Bailey...
a bad thing, but like that's not the movie. Like the thing everyone riffs on this movie is hardly a fraction of the actual movie.
That's a good point. Like legitimately, you know, it opens and it's like, oh, let me show you this is important for his childhood. And I like legitimately, I was waiting to get to the suicide scene for about the first hour of the movie. I was not aware of how much of it was going to be the flashbacky stuff. I legitimately expected, you know, after the childhood flashback, we're going to cut to the suicide. After the high school thing, we're going to cut to the suicide. Like, I kept expecting to get to that point much sooner than we did. So you're definitely right that the aping of this has entered into the public consciousness to an insane degree to where you think the entire movie is going to be George Bailey exploring this world where he never existed. And honestly, I wouldn't hate that either. I think that could maybe be kind of interesting to see done as well. Because, like, usually when something does the It's a Wonderful Life trope, it's like a half-hour show. So, like, you kind of do have to get straight to that part. And it's a show, so you've already lived in this character's world. But I think you could make a legitimately interesting, you know, not necessarily remake, but like do It's a Wonderful Life 2 kind of thing, where you just start in the world without the character, and then you learn about how good a person they were and how big an effect they had on things by seeing the world without them. You know.
Well, they do. There is actually a sequel from the '90s that is kind of that.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, it's the main character of that one is actually the angel, who's played by, I don't remember. It was a dumb TV movie. But it is more of that. More of that movie is the person who wished they weren't around, and they explore the world as if they were not around. The flaw, of course, just being it's a movie, it's a one-off, so you have almost no concept of what the world was like before them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I think that could maybe be interesting, but it is really cool to see like this guy's life, and I don't know. I was very impressed by the moral of this, because so often with like the Christmas movie thing, the protagonist that doesn't like Christmas or whatever is pretty much like a dick. You know, like they're always like a dick for not liking Christmas. That's what you get with Scrooge, right? But then you have George Bailey, and it's not that he doesn't like Christmas. He happens to have like his worst day ever on Christmas Eve. But it's not that he doesn't like Christmas. It's that this isn't what he wants to be doing with his life. But he's a good person, and so he is making that sacrifice for the sake of others. That is what routinely happens. You know, George Bailey, as a kid, just wants to go sledding with his friends, and his brother falls in the lake, and he, without question, dives in to help him, and it costs him. It costs him his hearing for the rest of his life. George Bailey, as a kid, is in his child labor job.
That's another one.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, you could have a job when you're like 13 or 14. He could maybe be that old. Anyway, George Bailey as a kid is in his job, and he sees that his boss is like horrifically depressed because he just got the worst news ever, and he's made a mistake and given someone poison instead of medicine. And like, even though it's kind of scary to take to not take the pills to the person because he's going to be seen as like he's causing trouble or something, he goes back to his boss, and he tells him, and he gets a beating for it, but he keeps trying to tell him, and he finally breaks through and gets through to the man. But it costs him. Like, it makes his hearing worse. He's in physical pain for doing the right thing. And then, you know, he's finally ready. He's going to go out, and he's going to go see the world like he wants to. But then his dad dies, and he cancels his trip and stays to, you know, shore up his father's things and make sure that everything's going to work out. And he's just about to leave, and then he just speaks his mind because it's the right thing to do, and he hopes it will inspire others. And it does, but it costs him. And this just keeps happening throughout the movie, is he keeps doing the right thing, and it has a negative effect on his life, but a grand positive effect on everyone else's. And that's a very inspiring story that I don't think you could... I don't know, I really have a hard time thinking of other things that do that now. Like, there's the heroic sacrifice, but usually it's some like big grand thing and it gets paid off anyway, so the person actually gets what they want in the end. But George Bailey never really gets the kind of reward that he's actually looking for. He just gets the chance to keep helping people.
That's the thing about the movie that I like so much, is at the end of the day, nothing really gets fixed for George. Nothing really solves itself. Mr. Potter is still Mr. Potter. The $8,000 is still missing, even though everyone pulled their money together to help George out in this one instance. He just kind of like learns to accept it. Like, when he comes back after he's had his little vision about what a world where didn't exist, he knows full well in that moment before anyone shows up that he's going to go to jail, but he wants to see his family again, and he wants to see his town again, and the place that he's helped cultivate and create this culture that becomes so important to him. The thing about George Bailey that's like probably the thing that I love most is that he's kind of just Superman. He's the person where you're in a world where there are complicated, morally gray choices, where things are not always going to work out, and for some fucking reason, it's only this guy that always makes the right choice. And like you can throw in the context and you can talk about like how his dad was doing business and how Mr. Potter's doing things and like the drugstore person and his son dying. Like everyone's living in these morally gray, problematic, difficult lives, and George Bailey's the only one that always just makes the right decision without question. And it does cost him, and he does give up on a lot of his dreams and what he wanted to be, and basically loses his entire life. But he always just makes the right choice, and that's the thing that's really, really deep and inspiring about him. And then you get to the end of the movie, and he hasn't like somehow made it better. He hasn't gotten Mr. Potter out of the town. He hasn't gotten a chance to go away. He just sort of learns to appreciate the life that he's lived and gotten up to this point. And that's just really, really sincere and really, really sweet. And you just don't see a lot of stories do that anymore. And that's the thing about stuff that does It's a Wonderful Life stories that I think they miss, is that they focus so much on looking at the world as if the person wasn't here, on what kind of perspective that allows so you can change things when you go back. It's always more about this sort of like, here's an alternate history lesson so you don't fuck up. It's not a appreciate the world you live in kind of situation, where we don't do enough of. It's not that George goes and sees his life in retrospect and then knows what he has to do to fix things. It's that he sees his life in retrospect, and if this is the end of it, he's happy about the life he lived. And you just don't do stories like that anymore. It's really, really tragic, but it's the most kind of sincere tragedy, where he comes back from his vision and he knows he's going to jail, but he's just over the moon and really, really happy about it. It's like that last scene in Daredevil Born Again where like Fisk is still out there, Matt's life still sucks, but he's happy now. It's okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's like personal contentment. It's not the whole point isn't about the alternative reality or the different angels or none of that. It's a character study of one man's life, and that's what's most important at the end of it is what he thinks about that and what he feels about that, and him learning piece of that. That's all you can ever do. One thing I like about this portrayal as well, and you kind of brought up a little bit, Steve, when you said like he's basically like Superman. What I like in this, it shows me like a good understanding of how to write a good character, like a person who is fundamentally good without making them patronizing or annoying or unrealistic, or just like making them an actual person still. Is George Bailey is kind, but George Bailey is not nice. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a distinction that a lot of people don't really understand a lot of the times, is he's got a bit of a mouth on him and he snaps. He knows he's not always centered when things pale down on him. Sometimes he just shouts and sometimes he has to get it across. He doesn't always understand things and like pick up on things like he should. He's confrontational and he gets kind of bitter about things, and at the end of the day, no matter how, even when he's literally about to jump to his death, he immediately is like, no, I gotta help someone, because at the end of his nature, like through all any of the things, what matters is he knows the fundamental truth that it's not that hard, that no matter what else is happening in life, if you see someone in trouble, you can help them, you should help them. And it's not as about as complicated as that. And I think that's what really helps make him stand out, and the ending of this stand out as an actual lesson to take from, rather than like, oh wow, if I was in that situation, this would never happen, or that's not realistic. It's like, no, if you're what's happening in your life, you can try and let yourself have that perspective of like, have I made someone's life better today? And does that make me feel good? Yeah, probably does. And that's like probably as much as we can all get as human beings around. So I don't know, 100% agree with you guys. That's really, really strong execution of an idea that in lesser hands can be and has been made kind of preachy.
Dope.
Yeah. I mean, that's just the thing at the end of it for me, is just like it's the story about a guy who's got a very, very difficult life, and he always makes the right choice, and at the end of it, he doesn't really get anything for it except that he appreciates the life he lived, and that's really, really inspiring.
Yeah, no, I really like that because part of me was watching this, and I guess this is where the modern cinema things like it's always tempting to think that the current art is like there's two camps. There's people that think the current art is the pinnacle of everything, and then they think there's people that think the current art is garbage and everything should just be back to the way it used to be, kind of thing, right? But I guess the thing that like I kind of had to do a double take on is it was a bit surprising that Potter never gets any comeuppance throughout the film, like at all. So possibly the most realistic film, rich man doesn't pay any consequences for his actions. Like,
oh boy.
Yeah, like, I mean, could you name another film where the villain steals $8,000, which in like 1940s money is like $80,000, and then just nothing happens to him? He's just like fine.
Revenge of the Sith. That's the bad ending to It's a Wonderful Life.
I don't know. It's just like I found that really interesting because I was like, oh wow, it's kind of weird that Potter doesn't receive any comeuppance. But I guess that's just like because the film's not really about that, which is, I don't know. It's on one point sure, but at the other point, man stole $8,000 and faces no consequences. Like, it's one thing when he's just like a slimy dude who's like taking advantage of people but hasn't done anything like legally wrong. So it's like he's a slime, but he's not like the worst kind of slime. You can tell he's got some kind of honor to him. And then there's when he just like fucking steals $8,000. It's just like, nah, I'm not giving it back, and I'm gonna fucking call the cops on you and shit too. Bam.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty extreme situation because he not only steals the money, but he calls the bank examiner and he's gonna have George arrested. Like, it's not even a matter of like George not being able to run his business. He's going to go to prison over this money because there's a deficit in his accounts. But I don't know. I like the idea that Potter never gets any comeuppance. I don't think it wrongly sends the message that at the end of the day there was no justice for Potter. I think it does, however, send rightly the message that despite living in a world like this, people can still come together in a way that allows us to survive. That at the end of the day, you're always going to kind of be in a Pottersville situation where everything is kind of awful and people will manipulate and people will lie and things will get very, very bad. But as long as you make those right decisions like George Bailey does, where it counts with the people around you, then you can get through it. Like, he doesn't need to get Potter arrested. He needs the people that he spent his entire life helping to, at the end, help him back.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's also a case where just looking at the film itself and like how characters are portrayed, Potter's never happy.
Mm-hmm.
He's always pissed off about something. He's never content. And so I'd argue he actually does get his comeuppance, because at the end George gets contentment, which is like kind of like, yeah, you, no matter how much money you have, you're never gonna have that if you're just a fucking prick all the time. Like, I think they're very much meant to be diametrically opposed, where yes, he's got everything he seemingly would want and can seemingly do anything he wants with no consequences. Kind of like the opposite of George, where like he'll do nothing but bad things and yet only he'll benefit where everyone else suffers, whereas George would do everything with good things and only he'll suffer where everyone else benefits. Is you see what that does to a man. Is he makes him old and bitter, and there's no one around him who loves him, and it's just kind of everything in his life is like, yeah, you look at it and it's like,
I mean,
oh,
I
yeah,
guess it just
like,
reminds me so much of my boss. I would really like some kind of comeuppance.
Pie in the face is always good. I do agree on that one, buddy. But I'm just saying, if you look at it from like a thematic level,
I'm gonna make an art
did
house
it really
film
lose?
I'm gonna make an
and
art house film where someone just eats Jeff Bezos. It's gonna be for art purposes. Jeff
And
Bezos
there's
supports
also
the
just
arts,
like
right?
a constant series of like George berating Mr. Potter throughout the movie. Like,
those are
this
pretty
first
sweet.
scene when he's a kid and he walks in on his dad's office and tells his dad not to let Mr. Potter talk to him that way. And then his dad dies and he has that speech where he calls him a warped, frustrated old man. Like, there's always like a constant philosophical argument between those two people about their specific dispositions. And the more George lets his circumstances get to him, the more he acts out in unkind ways like Mr. Potter. And at the end, he's on the exact opposite end of the spectrum, and he becomes entirely fulfilled and entirely okay. To the point where you don't even need Mr. Potter in the final scene because it doesn't matter. His influence doesn't matter. It's all about the people that are here with him right now, this family, not this outside person who's got nothing but his frustration.
Yeah, you're right. Still though.
The Ian cut, release the Ian cut where like you just clip to like Clarence pulls out like an AK-47, just like Quentin Tarantino ending of this version, where he like kicks down the door and just shoots him.
That would be the Tarantino remake of this movie.
Yeah.
Like everything's all the same except that last post-credit scene.
It's kind of a shame because Frank Capra's got a career of using Jimmy Stewart to have him like talk up against terrible old rich white people like this movie and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. But in real life, Jimmy Stewart was like a really hardcore Republican and campaigned for Ronald Reagan, so it's a shame.
See, like, honestly, like, things like that seem to disappoint people. I kind of like it more because then it's just like, haha, all the things that you value, your most famous examples speak out against. Fucker.
It's just like, wow, you really did not read that script properly, did you?
That's a fair point.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of like when stuff like that happens, honestly. Like, just when someone secretly knows they're wrong about everything they believe, so they end up just putting all their heart and soul into the things that speak out against their own beliefs. Like, I like when that happens. That gives me a little bit of a smile, not gonna lie.
That's fair.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. Potter, fucking... What else can we talk about with this film?
Did you guys think of Mary as like
Love
our
Mary.
second kind of main thing? Because I had a little bit of a conversation with Lo about that. Is like, she is kind of like a fucking icon in terms of just like a good female character who doesn't take no shit, but without being like a cartoon.
That's my favorite thing about her. Like, she's adorable. She's got great dialogue all the way through. She's got very clear goals and ambitions and plans. And she's just played so, like, fun-lovingly and charismatically throughout. And she's just got so many of, like, the best iconic lines throughout the movie. Like, specifically the one where he's making violent love to me. But her chemistry with Jimmy Stewart's really, really good. And just in terms of, like, leading ladies of this era, she's not, like, one of those, like, pin-up bombshell kinds of actresses. She's just, like, really wholesome and really, really cute. And you could see totally why anyone, especially George Bailey, would just fall in love with someone that just looks so kind.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I like how she's the driving force behind a lot of the really big things in this movie, like the getting them a house kind of thing, that dream house kind of thing. Then she's the one that's making it a better place while raising kids and being an army nurse. God, what a Mary Sue! She can just do everything. And then she's gonna use the Force. No training. She had no training for the home improvement. There was no YouTube. She wouldn't know what she's doing. No, like, I really like that she's the kind of the brains behind a lot of the things here. She's the one that thinks to use their honeymoon money, which, you know, shows that she's just as selfless a person as George. I really like the way she's, like, clearly a partner in helping people get their homes. She's clearly not, like, ever nagging or anything. I think that's really cool that she's shown as very supportive. And at the end of the day, it's her, and it's her that gets the community to rally and kind of bail George out this time, which is really, really great. And subsequently, it's her that ends up telling everyone the problem, whereas George just kind of keeps it to himself and has a mental breakdown. And so her telling everyone causes everyone to pray and summon the angel to help George. which is
It
kind
is.
of cool.
It is legitimately really sweet to see that, because Mary, from beginning to end, is like the pinnacle point of like being content and being happy and knowing what you want and being outgoing and all of these things. And by the end of it, George just has to learn to be more like her as opposed to the other way around, which is usually what it's like with female characters in older movies and even newer movies. It is legitimately really nice because she's not in a ton of it, like if you're really just gonna like break down screen time, but she is the sort of like driving force for everything that happens, especially by the end where she saves George's ass. But in so doing, kind of just proves the lesson of the movie even more that George needed to learn, which is at the end of the day, you need to be content about your own life and that people will come through, just like he spent his entire life coming through.
Mm-hmm. I definitely agree with that.
I love Mary. She's great. She's adorable.
I mean, she gets violent love made to her.
Yeah, exactly.
God, that is so good.
It's such a funny fucking line. And her delivery is just fucking baller. I love it.
It's making violent love to me, mother.
Context of it as well. It makes it so perfect because like he's so fucking oblivious. She literally is saying, fucking rail me, bro. And he's just like, wow, gee, that Mary fella's quite a bit screwloose. She's like, it's literally one of those comics where like she's got fucking airplane signs, like beep, beep, beep. He's like, fuck me. He's like, well, you know, I'm going to, oh Mary, what are we gonna do? It's like, fuck's sake. Like, just that's why someone to dub over it. Just like what Mary's really thinking. Like, come on, you prick.
You stupid fucking himbo. Just put a baby in me. Oh man.
All of our classic tropes come from this movie. The himbos, the simps, all of it.
This is truly. When we were talking about things that Wonderful Life has inspired, we're getting to the hard-hitting facts right now. I'm just telling you.
Oh yeah, for sure. I don't know. Is there anything else worth talking about? What did you guys think of? Like, okay, so this is just one of those things in movies that always kind of like gets me. So is George Bailey stupid for not just believing Clarence earlier? Like, I always get this way with movies where there's like, you know, mystical character shows up and does clearly like demonstrably magic thing, and then people spend like a good chunk of the time not believing them. Like when Clarence first shows up and talks about like, oh, I'm an angel and everything, I'm like, okay, yeah, maybe you're a little crazy. You know his name somehow or other. That's maybe a little suspect, but like, of course, you're not really an angel. You're just a crazy person. But then he's like, fucking, oh, you can hear out of that ear that hasn't worked since you're a kid again. That should probably be enough evidence to just believe the man. But then George spends like that whole section just still not believing that Clarence is an angel and like not believing everything that he's seen. And so I kind of found that one amusing.
I think that's just like, especially given like the time period, it makes it more egregious to me because like, you do anything in fucking 1950 and people will think you're fucking God. like, this should not be such a hard... Again, this is just a modern film, apparently, because he's like... This is what, like, would happen in, like, a regular, like, a 90s film or something, like a cheesy Adam Sandler film, where he's like, he'd spend, like, 30 minutes trying to think, oh, well, this isn't real. Whoa, this is pretty kooky. But, like, back then, you could fucking pull a rabbit out of the hat. People were like, oh my God, it's Jesus. No, I 100% agree with you. That just is just that kind of, again, it's exacerbated by the fact that it came out in 1949. People
46.
were not that
You guys
skeptical.
keep going up. It's 46.
It's even worse there.
Yeah. No, for real. The World War II scene or sections seem a little strange at all.
No way.
I don't know, like, he's protecting from the Blitz? Question mark?
I guess I just didn't pay attention to the details of World War II that they were talking about. I just assumed World War II happened in the interim and his brother's a war hero.
No, that's fine. But like, at one point, it's like, oh, George Bailey is fighting the battle of Brigham Falls, wherever the name of the town is, and it's like, yeah, okay, no, that makes sense. He's like organizing the rubber and the scrap metal drives. No, that was a big thing that happened. God, could you imagine that now? We can't get people to put fucking cloth on their face. The idea that they'll just give away tires. But like there's that whole scene, and like that part made sense. But like maybe I just don't know enough. It's like, oh, and George made sure to organize the blackouts or something. Maybe I'm like missing some context there. Or it just seemed so obvious at the time that they didn't feel the need to like explain it very much. But I'm like, they didn't blackouts in America? They didn't have the fucking Blitz over here. What?
Yeah, that's a weird one because this would have been like literally just a year after. So I gotta imagine all of that stuff's fresh and they would not have fucked up on it. But yeah, I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe it's just a case of like, because this happened around the time of like American war, like the martyr envy of Europe, where America wanted to pretend it had gone through the shit that other people had. So I actually wonder if it was just like, oh yeah, you remember the Blitz of New York.
I don't know. Maybe it's like, it couldn't have been like blackouts. Like, I'm trying to remember, some of these details on like the home front stuff are so small that it's hard to recall. Like I know the Oscars during World War II gave out wood statues because they couldn't afford the metal, or they didn't want to use the metal. Like there was stuff like that. Wonder if we did like blackouts to save energy and oil, like curfews on having your lights on, maybe.
Was it just a thing of like after Pearl Harbor there was the fear that you'd get hit again, so you did blackouts to avoid being a target? Was it just that?
I have no idea. Like, honestly, that detail just kind of escaped me, and I was like, it just made me do a quick double take, because it's only on screen for a second, and it's stated as so matter-of-factly, and the rest of the stuff they talk about, like, jives with what I know. I just feel like I'm missing some context or something.
What state are they in?
Mystical land. They're in the same state as Springfield, which borders the states of Colorado, Illinois, and Rhode Island.
Right. Okay. Cool. I was just wondering if there was maybe like a context depending on where they were located. But yeah, I have no idea then. Because like if they were located closer to like I don't know, like a warm water port or something, like if it was a river town, maybe there's some reason, but I have no idea.
Yeah. No. It was just odd to me. I don't know if like. I'm misremembering something. Here I am, Mr. History Buff, and someone's going to be in the comments and like, Ian, I can't believe you forgot about the blackouts that were ordered across the country to save energy or some shit like that. Like,
turns out Sid Part 2 was the biased education system all along.
Oh, okay. I just Googled it. Blackout regulations were imposed on September 1st, 1939, before the declaration of war.
Oh, okay. So I was right. Yeah, I was thinking on it. I was like, was that it? Cool. All right. No, so I guess that makes more sense now.
Mystery solved. Good job, team.
Good job.
Excellent. Okay, it's just Steve.
I just Googled it.
Look, man. We are a team of 3, but with the efficiency of like half of 1.
No, you don't understand. Alfie and I are clearly Scooby and Shaggy, and then fucking Steve is Velma. Matt's our Fred. We're missing our Daphne.
Ruh-roh. Luis is our Daphne.
Yes.
Just looking all hot and shit. Yeah, I could buy that.
Yeah, exactly. Ruh-roh indeed. But yeah, that's one of those things. It's interesting that, again, it's always, when you see films talk about like the war, like World War II, that are so close to it being like recent memory, I always find it fascinating of like how people talk about it, because it's different than how, even when we do war films that are set in that period, like set post World War II, you can't capture the feeling of the people who actually lived through it talking about it.
you know, like, I don't know, it's interesting as well because they're very, I'm not sure if this is tasteful or just the idea would be like too shocking or too disgusting for the time given it came out. Like, again, I feel like if you made this movie today, Potter would have been like at the very least a Nazi sympathizer or some shit. And like to get that war flashback, and it's like, and Potter helped organize the draft. I'm like, oh, well, okay, so you made him a dick, but in a different way.
Well, I mean, I'm sure Mr. Potter sold a lot of metal and other things to the Nazis and the Americans at the same time.
Probably war profiteer. That'd be an interesting direction to go.
Oh yeah. He doesn't see the allegiances; he just sees the dollars.
His only allegiance is to the mighty dollar. Yeah, I don't know. Just something that stood out to me. I'm trying to remember what the fucking like. I remember Cracked did a video on this film at one point, and they had some kind of one of those internet bad faith hot takes on how Mr. Potter was the actual good guy of the film somehow or other. Well, like, so much of that is just meant to drive clicks. It's hilarious to me. I don't know, just a thought that occurred.
I mean, I guess if we want to talk about more just weird things about this movie, the kid that plays young George, when he's getting berated by Mr. Gower, the drugstore owner, he does actually hit that kid in the ear over and over again until he bleeds.
Ouch.
Yup. So that's a thing.
I mean, it's hardly the worst thing I've heard from one of these old film sets. I guess I'll fucking take it. Like, still can't look at Brando the same.
Oh,
you know,
God,
if I can watch Superman's dad rape somebody, you know, for the movie though, so it was okay. I'm just like, what the fuck?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not top of the list of terrible things that happen, but like, as wholesome as this movie is, there is definitely more than a few situations where it's gonna fall into the same problems as everything else from that era.
Yeah. It's like, it's fine, the kid can bleed from the ear, what's wrong? Well, my pop used to hit me in the ear all the time. I turned out fine. What was that? Didn't quite catch ya.
This is also in that nice little sweet spot of movies from the 40s and 50s that's pretty well preserved. So there is a color version of it that came out at some point. I've never seen the color version. I've only ever seen the black and white. But it's also one that we actually not only have the film reel for this, but we have a bunch of alternate takes and a bunch of deleted scenes that are all preserved and saved that never got released. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Okay, I gotta read this. I fucking found the article.
Wait, what?
This segment, number 1 of like the top 10 reasons why Mr. Potter actually is the good guy.
Oh, shit.
From the intellectual takeout, okay? The triumph of evil. In one of the darkest moments of the film, George Bailey's Christmas tree is jolted and one of the bells adorning it rings. George Bailey, now confident him and his fraudulent real estate scheme are safe, suggests the bell signifies an angel has earned his wings, as if his dishonest business dealings and ruthless defamation of legitimate competitors had divine sanction. Nothing more is heard of Henry Potter, the man without whom Bedford Falls would not exist. He is left friendless, and without the one thing he could cling to before George Bailey, the devil incarnate, wrestled it from his grasp. His honor. As the credits roll, evil has triumphed. The economic fallacies inherent in Baileyism become accepted truth, resulting in disaster and the disaster, including the most recent in 2008. What the fuck?
Man, there is not a guillotine sharp enough
I
to
think
get
that's,
that head out of that ass.
I think that is pretty clearly just farce,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
fair
of,
enough.
of course, but like, I'd like to pretend it's just the hottest of hot days.
Right?
It's funny shit. It's funny shit. Read the rest. What are the rest of the reasons? Come on. I gotta know.
It's a long fucking article, dude. I'm not gonna lie.
Just give like the first sentence of each reason.
Alright. Okay.
You did the research. Now you're gonna fucking sit in your grave. This is what you get.
Potter, the stockholder. We don't know how Potter became a stockholder, but the Bailey building alone does not appear to be a publicly traded company. The most likely explanation is Peter Bailey asked Potter for capital, just as George Bailey does later in the film. In between of the rounds of disparaging Potter as a greedy capitalist, that would be completely consistent with today's progressives who rail against capitalists out of one side of their mouths or sucking up to them for money out of the other. Holy shit! People like Potter's houses, Potter the rescuer, he gets the Bailey building out, smearing Potter, there's allegations. 2 generations of Baileys had defamed him. Potter's breaking poll, he'd be prosecuted for keeping $8,000, which may have been tricky from a legal standpoint. We don't know, we never provided Potter any opportunity. His passion to call and clear up the misunderstanding. George Bailey sets off on his suicide melodrama, followed by a long, self-aggrandizing hallucination about angels. Oh my god. This is fucking good.
Yeah, I love hot takes, man. Hot takes are the best.
That's pretty iconic. Let me get the author of said article right now, because Tom Mullen, you sir, are a master. Truly. Truly you were right.
Oh. Alright. Well, I don't know. Is there anything else we want to talk about with this film, or we want to go ahead and wrap up and go on to the ratings?
I'm okay to go ahead and go to ratings.
Yeah, let's shoot for that. The Triumph of Evil, the alternative title for this film.
The Triumph of Evil. Alright. I really did enjoy this film. Like, I've talked about some odds and ends here that are kind of on the side, but like really nothing that ruined my enjoyment. I was surprised at how much I liked it. So I'm gonna give this film 5 out of 5 instances of violent lovemaking.
That was gonna be everyone's, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's why I went it first.
Pretty much. He's a scumbag. That's Sid part 2. He's a rapscallion.
You'd do it if you had any balls.
Well, for me, this film, I actually did enjoy it until I read that scathing review. And now I can't look at it the same way ever again. This is the reason why Donald Trump lost the election, and we lost all the you SJW scum. Obviously been so inspired by this that you've forgot the true meaning of Christmas. Money. So I'm actually gonna give this my first ever 0 out of 5 fucking angel wings, because no angel has earned his wings from this devilish monstrosity.
I'm gonna go ahead and give this 5 out of 5 lassos to the moon.
Nice.
Oh, that's good.
Nice. All right. I gotta be quick because I only got a couple minutes of recording time left. Do we want to do an episode to come out on Christmas Day, or is it looking too busy?
I have nothing to do.
I'm free as well.
Okay, so it'll just be whether or not Matt can make it. That's fine. So discussion topic. Whose turn would it be? Would it be Matt's turn?
So.
It's either Matt or me.
It's Matt because we went out of order. It was supposed to be his pick for review this time. So it's technically Matt, or you can go in his place and it'll mess up our rotation, which will actually fix it.
Yeah, no, that's the problem with the 4-person rotation. All right, fucking the Christmas topic. Do you have to be nice on Christmas? Let's talk about that. That's
boy.
Yeah, I know, that's gonna be an interesting one. So do you have to be nice on Christmas? Okay, everyone, thank you very much for watching. We'll see you there. Until next time, I'm the philosopher.
I am the champion of Christmas.
And I just got my angel wings.
And we're your geeky gentlemen, and we will be discussing things.
ho, ho! Merry Christmas!